Welcome to the Our Jahaan Podcast. My name is Maheen Qureshi, and as you may know, Our Jahaan is a new podcast that I've started with the Jahaan Institute, and our mission is to bring everyone closer together in our world. Our Jahaan means our universe, our world. And with all of the divisiveness going on that is seemingly putting an emphasis on the differences between us, we do have a lot of unique qualities amongst communities, and we have a lot of similarities. So you will find that these conversations dig deep into getting to know really cool people and to learn some work that they're doing. And so today I'm particularly excited to have a very mission-driven person, Stephanie Cote. Stephanie, thank you for joining the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Maheen.
It's great to be with you. And for our audience, I wanted to share a little bit more about Stephanie and why we have her here today. Stephanie is a nonprofit strategist. She's a certified financial educator. She's a professional coach and founder of Eagle Woman Soars LLC. That is limited liability corporation. I know we have a global audience, and that's kind of a US term. Stephanie supports Native-led organizations through financial education, grant development, and trauma-informed coaching. She also serves families as a J-certified parenting coach with her transformational parenting course, which is launching this year. So we may hear about it as we converse with her today. In 2023 to 2024, she has been a National Endowment for Financial Education visiting scholar. And she is a creator of several national curricula in the United States. Stephanie brings a deeply relational, healing-centered lens to her work. She integrates her background as a certified personal trainer and group fitness and nutrition coach, recognizing that wellness is foundational to leadership and generational thriving. In her spare time, which I don't know how she has any, she designs and creates indigenous-based jewelry and new and upcycled clothing. So that is amazing already. That's just a very high-level bio of Stephanie. She's a very multidimensional person. So I'm really excited to have her here. And I just want to quickly let our audience know that I've had the great opportunity to collaborate with Stephanie a few years ago in some work that we were doing together as partners in Native American and Native Pacific Islander financial and economic empowerment here in the United States. And then I've had the pleasure of getting to know her more in the last few years. And so I thought we could learn so much from her. We like to first dig into our guests' kind of personal and professional life, if you will. Stephanie, I'd love for you to share where are you from and talk to us a little bit, if you can, about your heritage and maybe some of the roles that you play in your life that are really important to you.
Okay, where to begin? I'm from northern Michigan. Ani, Stephanie Cote, and Indigenous, Grand Traverse Band Dawam, and Wachapuan Dimdados. Hello, my name is Stephanie Cote. I'm from Grand Traverse Band in Michigan. I'm Anishinaabe, which means of the three fires, and the three fires are Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe. And I am from rural northern Michigan, which is up here if you're familiar with Michigan in the Mitt. I'm in the Pinky. Formerly was in the Pinky. My family's all in the Pinky. I'm now located in Denver, Colorado. Not to get into like the whole history, but after I graduated in the recession in 2009. I went to the University of Michigan. The plan was to move back home, support the community, but there weren't jobs really available. So I found a job out in Seattle, got bit by the nonprofit bug, and Denver is home to several national Native nonprofits that are nation serving. From Seattle, got a job at Owista Corporation based in Longmont, Colorado, or a little bit north of Denver, and I've been here for now almost 20 years. So,
Awesome.
yeah, on and off. I went back home a few stints and realized that there's a lot of snow in Michigan. So,
Which is why I sometimes like to visit Michigan, but I don't live there because I don't do well in cold weather. I know some people do. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about where you're from here in the United States. And I appreciate it, although, of course, I didn't understand the words that you were saying. But thank you for speaking what I think is perhaps one of your native languages. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, Anishinaabe and I translated right after, so that
Yes,
works.
you did. You sure did. Thank you so much for doing that. Our purpose here is to learn from each other, and I'm constantly learning about everything. I think we all are in the world. I will say I have and had been here for a long time in the United States doing a lot of work with communities across the country and traveling since my young professional days. And it was not until quite a bit later in my life, in the US and in my professional experience, that I got to understand a bit more about indigenous communities in America or in the United States. And so, while I don't want to assume that all of our audience is in the exact same learning position, I do think that there is very limited understanding, really, of Native communities in the United States, even in America, by people in America, much less globally. So again, we want to keep digging in more into some of what you do, what makes you tick, and also hear from you, Stephanie, with your really unique lens as to some of the challenges that Indigenous communities face in America, and also some of the opportunities and the incredible things that they're doing. You are so multidimensional, and it's really clear that you're very intentional with your choice of work and career. So can you tell us a little bit more about what drives you, and how does it all kind of come together for you?
Hmm. Well, I yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that most of my work is through research. So I do a lot of still like the fitness, for example. I have been taking fitness classes in different forms of sport throughout my whole life, and so becoming a certified fitness instructor was just more me looking into how to be the best um, or the most knowledgeable about that modality. The finances, I will be the first to say I loathe capitalism. I said that at a National Treasurers convening, and it was funny to see the reactions in the room. Some faces were like, yeah, and others just like felt like, did she just say that? Like,
Hmm.
financial education would not be the first thing that came to mind of, I really want to do that. It was more out of necessity. Oyster Corporation was hiring, and I found myself more in the service. I love nonprofits because it's really community based and serving community through mission driven work, and they happen to be within the financial sector. So creating financial education and loan opportunities for communities that don't normally have those. So they serve community development financial institutions, which are typically community driven loan funds. And the communities that most of these institutions serve are places that don't have access to normal streams of capital. So, first to say, would not have chosen that for my career, but I have become over time passionate about it by creating areas of not, there's a lot of gatekeeping when it comes to finances. So, being that person that can open those gates for folks, whether that be through finding streams of capital or for just general financial education. So, and all of this I bring with a lens of I'm an Indigenous woman from a rural area. So the way I walk through the world is with a lens as an identity of Native and woman. So bringing that to everything that I do because it's just uh, who I am. And then the parenting thing was me search. I had children and found that we learned through modeling. We know this in research and a lot of our parenting because we're in high stress often when we're parenting is very stressful. So we go into default parenting as generally how we were parented. And I love my parents and also recognize patterns of parenting that I didn't want to continue. And so I got into parent coaching more for my knowledge. And then I realized how much of a transformation it made in my life that I'm creating transformational parenting. And it's not only for Indigenous communities. Going through this, I realized like my parenting was a combination of on my white side, immigrant parenting coming from different communities and in a survival state, and then an indigenous side on my dad's side, where there was parenting, but a lot was broken through boarding schools. And I think a lot of communities are facing this. So a whole generation, my great grandparents were shipped off to boarding schools, and that was their child rearing. So their modeling of parenting was off of this very oppressive, abusive schooling system. And
Mhm.
so my grandma broke generational patterns of parenting in her parenting, but there's also like through that process, it takes time and generations to really like retrain what parenting looks like and to get back to a nonviolent approach, which is what our indigenous communities were used to.
Mhm.
So all that to say is I've been in consulting for 2 years now, and now I'm kind of pivoting toward coaching and parenting, but also doing nonprofit development work and financial education. So I've worked with a few for-profit and nonprofits in the past few years to help them revamp their financial education curricula.
That's awesome. Stephanie, if you're willing to give us a little education minute here, can you help ground our audience in even a basic understanding of tribal communities and tribal sovereignty in the United States? Just how many tribes are there? What does this all mean? When you say boarding schools, then I think perhaps there could be a connection point in understanding what that might be coming from.
Okay, great. Yes, I
Thank,
knew I threw that around, and I'm like, oh
thank
no.
you.
I also teach like Indian Country 101 for nonprofits and for profits for educational purposes. Those are like
Hmm.
hour-long classes and an hour and a half where we're just like spitting information. So I'll try and do a like short synopsis.
Thank
Um,
you.
so back in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue and did not land in the Americas. Landed in South America. So tribal communities have been here for this people say time immemorial. We've been here in different areas. Folks came from different communities across the pond, generally Europe. They came over to a place which they thought was new territory, unsettled. But there were several nations existing here, individual communities. One fun fact is that um, our democracy is based on, yes, it's based on Greek democracy, but also the Haudenosaunee Federation democracy. So it's rooted here in the US from a, a tribal community that practiced democracy. So we had many people here. In short, through colonization, many communities were driven further west. Oklahoma, we may have heard of the Trail of Tears, where they marched tribal communities from the East Coast to Oklahoma, present day Oklahoma. There were disease um, driven genocide where diseases from Europe just there was an immunity built toward them. So smallpox was rampant. We went from an estimated population in the millions to just hundreds of thousands within a few decades, it's estimated. There was also like mass genocide. So, trigger warning, I should have said trigger warning. For many native populations, so we talk about scalps, where it's practice to cut the hair or the scalp off of someone you unalive. And especially out in the West, folks got money for children, women, and warriors or men. And they all had different price points. You can look these up. So there was like paid genocide. And indigenous folks weren't viewed as human. Was they might have been taken as slaves, or many were. Then there was mass genocide. And then if you get up, so I'm working from like the 1500s up until like the late 1800s. Then we bring in like boarding schools. So because they couldn't like completely eradicate us, they said, okay, kill the Indian, save the man. So that means take away all culture, uh, everything, and take them. They took children to these boarding schools, so it was forced. It's not like boarding schools if you think of like, oh, mama, I'm gonna go
Right. Not
go
the
to
fancy
the
kind of
fancy
boarding
boarding
school.
school. No, it was first it started out as uh what were they? Religious institution run. That's the word I'm looking for. So they were run by religious institutions, and then the state stepped in after seeing some of them weren't being run very well, but they were federally funded schools where they'd take children and strip them of their identity. So they had uh, uh, uniforms. They all had their hair cut, which is really huge significance. So our hair, you might see a lot of natives with really long hair. It's our connection to spirit. I know, kind of similar to the Avatar movie where they're like
Mhm.
connected to their animals. Or just like some of the movies, I'm like, ugh, cringe. But
Mm.
in our spirituality, our hair is connection to ancestor and spirit. So really sacred. So
Mhm.
when they immediately went to the boarding schools and cut that off, they cut ties to culture, spirituality. They wouldn't let them practice language. For like my history, my grandma was 9 and she ran away from the boarding school. She traveled,
Oh,
I think it was 150 miles or close to 200 miles by foot as a 9-year-old to go back
wow.
because she was witnessing death and this horrible place. The last time she ran away was age 13. So she ran away at 9. They went and grabbed her and took her back, and then she ran away again at 13. And I think it's just because she was just witnessing this horrible environment. So in the 1930s, I think, is when they did a research study at the federal level and decided that this, this is horrible what we're doing to these communities, and they got rid of it. And then you see in the 1960s and 70s a resurgence of Native identity. We had the AIM movement, American Indian movement, and kind of a resurgence of culture and language and bringing it back. So we had like a few centuries there of like really rough times, and definitely in the early 1900s, still continuous mass genocide, and then the late 18 or 1900s coming in with like a resurgence and reclaiming. For every tribe, it's different in the timeline of the 1900s of when tribal recognition came in. There was also a period of time where there was tribal unrecognition from the federal government as they were trying to like get rid of tribes. They realized that tribes having sovereignty was counterintuitive to what they were trying to do at the federal level, especially with like resource management. So we have tribes being recognized at different points in the 1900s. Different treaties were written through the 18 and 1900s. Treaties are government to government contracts in recognizing certain rights. For an example, one treaty right that some Michigan tribes have is gill netting, where it was a traditional form of fishing. Um, so that's a traditional. Some also have different hunting rights, and these treaties were written in exchange for land often. So every tribe has a different one. Every tribe has what we call sovereignty. They're a sovereign nation, and that means that they have a government to government relationship. Every tribe that's recognized federally is their own government. So they have
Mhm.
their own police force, medical, everything you would imagine, and they have, like, a similar recognition to a state.
Okay, and
Um,
how many are there in the
uh,
US that are federally recognized? Is it
I
575-ish? Does
Yeah, it
that
used to
sound
say
about right?
575. I think what we just increased one, the Lumbee tribe out in,
Okay.
so
Thank
576-ish
That
tribes.
was a really interesting background, and I know that, like, even an hour is not enough for, like, you could have a whole college or grad school level course on Native communities and beyond, so thank you so much for sharing, and my understanding is the 575-ish, federally recognized tribes, there those are there, and then there are tribal groups that are not even recognized beyond that. So there are
Yeah,
many, many tribal groups and communities in the United States today.
yeah. There are, I wanna say 700 some state recognized tribes. So you have different
Mm,
levels of recognition too. So
okay.
they're unrecognized, there's state recognized, and then there's federally recognized. So
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. As far as development goes, I know there's been this kind of resurgence. There's this focus on a lot of economic development and all kinds of development in Indian country or in tribal communities. People are either living on the reservation or off the reservation. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? So you will have native individuals and families anywhere in the United States or abroad, right? Just like anyone else.
mhm,
And what struck me, so as somebody who grew up in developing countries, Pakistan, Myanmar, the Philippines, Indonesia, before settling in the US, I've seen, the whole spectrum of from abject poverty to extreme wealth in those countries. And I will say, while I knew there was poverty in the United States, I had no idea that there are so many areas, especially in tribal communities and in rural America, that don't even have sanitation systems or running water. So
mhm.
I don't know if you wanted to comment a little bit on any of that or beyond.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's where the I guess I wasn't super opposed to, working in finance because I witnessed these areas, where brick and mortar banking just didn't exist and access to capital and capital structures. That was banking deserts, which leads to food deserts, and through the timeline of land acquisition within colonization, it was strategic where these reservations were placed. Like, some would be without any water access. So how do you farm? How do you hunt? And we have this traditional knowledge that we've grown throughout centuries and centuries of living in certain areas. All of that knowledge is just eradicated because people have been displaced from those traditional lands. So when it came to community development financial institutions, these are community driven lending institutions to provide capital. It's because we've had now like a few centuries of being removed from traditional lands, having to adapt, and then also being like strategically out of line with like access to capital. It's only been through there was the Indian Gaming Act, where tribes are able to have gaming structures or casinos, for revenue generating. Some tribes jumped on that bandwagon and were able to capitalize on it. And it's not for everyone. Like, if you're in a remote tribe in the middle of nowhere, it's really hard to gain traction on creating, up back in the 1800s and early 1900s, when they're like displacing folks and putting them in these reservations or these remote areas. They weren't like landscaping and seeing if there's oil or anything. So some tribes have been fortunate enough to be in an area like Oklahoma has some oil lands where there's been oil drilling. So some tribes were able to, and individuals were able to lease land and make money off of oil rights. Others have tried other forms of generating capital. So there's tribal tourism, so taking folks and seeing different tribal lands. There's also hunting and fishing licenses. So some tribes have unique hunting opportunities. It was strategic in how the government and colonization placed tribes in areas where there would be abject poverty, and systemic and continued poverty. It,
Mhm.
it was I mean, it's been intentional genocide for
Oh,
the whole existence of,
yeah.
er, of Western colonization.
Mhm, mhm. When I was talking about your background, one of the things that you're doing is trauma-informed coaching, and so when you hear the word genocide, and it really wasn't long ago, and there are obviously remnants of trauma that people are living with right now, how does that inform the work? What makes your style or approach to life coaching, parent coaching, fitness and nutrition coaching, all the different kinds of coaching you do? What is the approach that you take, which is informed by
Mm,
trauma
great
or
question.
working on trauma?
Yeah. So, like you had mentioned earlier, just looking at it from a holistic, like, standpoint of we are not just singular entities and we are a products of our history and genetics, and it can also be transformed. So we aren't bound by it, but it is a lot of what we bring with our identity. So understanding that and history and looking at the person as a whole.
Mm,
Um, a lot of so a lot of the coaching is really just stepping back, and coaching is different than counseling or consulting, where folks go to you for as a consultant or a coach for advice. Coaching is guiding someone through their own and realizing their own natural um, talents. So where we may have like some resources if asked upon to provide, coaching is really about utilizing or viewing the person as whole and resourceful and
mhm.
having the answers from within.
Yeah. Yeah, that
Um,
really resonates with, even the type of, training that I've been able to take lately is, like you're saying, having that inner wisdom that we can tap into. And, I love what you're saying about the whole person because again, we are whole people and we're all very interdependent on each other in this world that we live in. So that holistic approach really makes sense.
mhm,
Yeah.
definitely. And also not gatekeeping knowledge. So recognize my coaching is so different from my training. It's really hard, especially when it comes to parenting, to if you're given a certain model to try and recreate it without having tools or resources available. So that's why like training is separate from coaching because it's like, okay, here are the tools and the methods and pick and choose what will work for your unique situation. And
Mhm.
then coaching is really about digging into each coaching has its own unique thing. So if I was doing life coaching, it'd be like, let's dig into like your past patterns and how you future visualize and what are the steps you want to take to get there. Um,
Mhm.
but like
Yeah.
fitness and parenting are also they're gonna have levels of like folks are gonna want to know how to get there, you know? Like
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
fitness coaching, you the coach has several tools to be able to offer. With coaching, it's really important to get in and see specifically what that person will resonate with. So
Mhm.
you don't want to like give someone a hit routine when all they really want to do is Pilates and yoga. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Really kind of personalizing it. And again, with all the different types of coaching you do, and you shared that a lot of it has come from you seeking it out for yourself, your own family, your personal life. It is, you have this great lens to be able to connect those dots. And I know that you work more broadly with Native communities as well as all communities. And on the topic of not gatekeeping, like I've definitely seen you practice what you preach on that. So thank you for that, because for everyone listening, we've had a women's empowerment circle with the Jahaan Institute, and we've had a Jahaan Collective, which is the mixed gender community where we've been doing some leadership development, self leadership, learning from each other, focusing on well being and sharing information with each other. So, Stephanie, you've been really forthcoming with sharing some of your knowledge, and that's really, really appreciated. What I do want to ask you is a little bit about like threading a theme together from the wisdom of Native American and indigenous communities across the United States and your own personal lens, perhaps, is the concept of the seven generations. So, was wondering if you could speak to that. Like, what is it, and how does it apply to your family and your heritage?
Oh yeah. Uh, so the seven generation teachings are different tribes have different teachings, and one that I have been taught with my culture is that we look every decision that we make affects seven generations out, and we are the product of the vision from the past seven generations. And it's cool to think about because if you think seven generations back, like we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. And I can only imagine what will happen seven generations from now. I
Mhm,
teach this in finances. I just wrote a blog about it, but I encourage folks to think like it's like the butterfly effect, like what decisions you make today may impact seven generations from now. So, from a financial standpoint, what do you want to do, or how do you want to affect change seven generations from today? And how will your financial decisions do that? So,
mhm,
one example that I think I shared with Maheen was my great great grandfather, was given land through the Dawes Act, I think, or the Indian Allotment Act. So, natives, in exchange for land or freedom, were given allotted land. So they had like a small parcel of land to farm or do what they want with. Um, this was separate from reservations, and he did end up selling his because they put them up toward the reservation. But my community never lived there. We traced it back like several generations back through the French Jesuit era,
mm,
and like my family's only lived along the west coast of or the west shore of Michigan. And so like my family wasn't from there. So he sold his land and bought a parcel of land um, in Honor, Michigan. And from there, when he passed, he wrote in his will that it needed to stay within the family.
mhm,
So from him, it was inherited by one of his sons. There is controversy in that exchange, but that son left it to his children, and one happened to be my uncle. And if you're in Indian country, uncles and aunts are just like folks that are older than you. My grandma grew up on this farm, my great great grandpa's 60-acre farm. She was born and raised there, and then her dad was able to purchase his own land. And that's where she lives now. She inherited his house. And so her cousin, slash, we call him uncle, had inherited a parcel of my great great grandpa's land. And then he didn't have any heirs. And my dad is his namesake. So my dad inherited this land. And my children have benefited from this land. So we're thinking of like great grandpa, great great grandma grew up on the land. My dad now owns it. I have it, my kids have it, so my great grandkids will be the seventh generation, or my grandkids will, and they'll inherit a part of the land. He
Mhm.
did have like several children, so if you think about it, in 7 generations, is it 1,200 ancestors? It's some really large number. So like you will have 1,200 direct from 7 generations behind you. Um, so it is pretty incredible that like I directly impacted from his idea of generational wealth building. Because
Mhm.
there are several hundred, there are thousands of cousins that have come from my great great grandpa, but we've been fortunate to be like one of the few lineages that are benefiting from this generational, from his vision
Mhm.
uh, of land ownership. And this was a time when like he came from a place when land ownership was a new concept. So to think like, no, like my children's 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 children will, this land will be theirs. Well, I don't want to say progressive, but it was just like, um, he had the 7 generation mindset of like,
Mhm.
this, what I have today will continue on. And same, so my grandma inherited her house. That house is going to be given to one of the family members. It probably won't be mine because we already own the great great grandfather's. Oh, so my grandfather, great great grandfather, we have his great grandfather will probably go to another relative. All that to say is that the decisions that we make today financially can impact several generations into the future, and you can secure one or a small part of your lineage security in doing
Mhm.
something just as simple as saying, this house cannot be sold to anyone that's not a blood relative.
Thanks for sharing that. It seems that we can learn from this wisdom of having a vision beyond what's under our nose and the year that we're living in. When we talk about, the buzzword sustainability, sustainable development in our world, natural resource management, conservation, all these things. I know you and I have been talking offline, and indigenous communities all around the world have been really mindful of not using more than you can really sustain. So there definitely seems to be some wisdom here that we can take. And I wonder if, as we transition into the latter part of our conversation, if you'd be willing to share as you look at bridging the opportunities, working on some of the challenges and that are informed by even some of the trauma that Native community members may carry, and you're looking at bridging with the modern contemporary world. And you mentioned capitalism, right? The mainstream, if you will, economy that we're a part of. Um, that must be really tricky. What does that feel like? What does that work look like? Like, and are there any opportunities to bridge those two worlds, if you will, together?
Yeah, that's something I've been grappling with throughout my entire career is, um, and the only thing I can think of is like these opportunities for bridges. Capitalism is not, oh, okay. So we talk about subsistence economy, which is being in subsistence and harmony with the natural world. And capitalism is very individual. If you look at it, we've got social security numbers, our retirement's only tied to us. It's not community based, where like a traditional native subsistence economy is about harmony, community, utilizing. So if you have the opportunity for having a harvest, sharing that with the community, utilizing every single piece of that. So like nothing's discarded, nothing's wasted because it was a gift from the earth. So like if you happened to have a deer and you would utilize every single piece. The tendons and ligaments can be used for sinew, which can be used for sewing. Bones can be used to make utensils. Like every single piece of an animal is utilized, and the excess meat is given to the community. It's not hoarded for one individual family. Um, so there are opportunities to like bridge these concepts. So like you had mentioned, Maheen, we're being mindful of our limited, non-infinite resources within our natural world, not over harvesting. So looking at it, trying to maintain a community-based lens in looking at capitalism. So thinking of the seven generation mindset, how will my efforts impact communities 7 generations out? So this is where we might look at if you go to a college campus, like the names on buildings, like someone was generous and now it's not just one person's family who can be independently wealthy for several generations. Now, like a college campus has a building that supports several community members or donated lands. So, different parks where communities can gather for several generations. You see, like, oh, I don't know, like so
Mhm.
and so's name of park. And we see these all over urban areas. I'm in the Denver metro area. And so these
Mhm.
beautiful landscapes have been generously donated. And now my family and many other community members who don't come from generational wealth or large amounts of generational wealth. I mean, I do have a piece of land, but um, for large amounts of community, uh, many communities can benefit from it. So I think where, yes, subsistence and capitalism, I've been trying to blend them and they just are not. It's oil and water at this point,
Mm.
but we
Mhm.
can kind of bring them together and utilize concepts from community driven work within
Yeah.
capitalism in order to sustain larger amounts of
Mhm.
spreading the wealth and resources. And like my mission not being a gatekeeper of anything. Like in my community, there's a being, there's no snow on the ground, so I can't openly talk about it, but there's a mythical creature that embodies greed. And it's like one of the ultimate symbols of what you do not want to become. And in this
Mm.
story of this creature, they are so consumed with greed and consuming, and they physically eat everything in sight and devastate lands behind them that they end up consuming themselves.
Mm.
And it's kind of how I view capitalism is, and now that we're in late stage capitalism, it's kind of destroying itself in its like
Mhm.
large monstrosity that it's become.
Clearly, a lot of development has happened, and like you said, we may be our ancestors' wildest dreams, and at the same time, what are we leaving? What world are we leaving for our children, grandchildren, and 7 generations out? And while at the end of the day, I'm an optimist, I think we all have the potential to come up with the solutions to the problems that we face. It has to be intentional. And, we've done a fair amount of breaking in this world. So, maybe taking the collective wisdom from various communities and indigenous as well as in the United States and across the world practices and, gosh, with AI, with technology, we can crowdsource the best of data if we're intentional and the best of information. And what does it look like to even turn that into a collective type of wisdom, right? That is truly sustainable,
Mhm.
because that is what we all need for a good life, like every single one of us on earth. So I love these themes, and you've been like so generous with even sharing your knowledge today. That is wealth in and of itself, Stephanie. So it's the early 2026, and I wanted to ask you as we wrap up, what are your top priorities? What are some things you might be excited about for 2026 for Stephanie? Whatever
Um,
it is.
for me personally, so I'm hoping in the next few by February, mid-February, I'll be launching a training program for parents, and it's a 6-module training course on transformational parenting. It covers a variety of topics, including like what are the foundational pillars, how to manage social emotional intelligence for parents and children, like a tap into what nonviolent communication looks like with children, and adults, like everyone should learn how to
Hmm.
communicate.
Okay.
Managing big emotions, so how to help your children regulate and navigate their own big emotions. Boundaries with love. So as parents, I know we need, and humans, I work on this with adults, is how do I set boundaries with love? And then collaborative consequences. So we want our children to be critical thinkers, and it's one of the skills that with AI on the rise and uh, everything being fed to us, it's a really an important thing to maintain as a human being is our access to critical thinking. And so we're having to navigate all these new tools that are actually like hindering developing critical thinking skills. One way that we can help our children is instead of just dictating to them, like, this happened and now you're grounded or something, working together, like looking at your child as they come into this world with wisdom. And that's our native teaching, is that every generation, every age of development has their own gifts to this world to bring, and they have their own wisdom. So, how do we as parents in our society tap into that? And in the training course, it's not native. I didn't indigenize it much, but it is the lens I bring to everything, just as my
Hmm.
identity. So I'm really excited to be able to share that with the world, just because that's the world that I've been living in for the last, only coming up on 6 years now. But it's something that I see as really necessary in the world, is
Hmm.
creating or guiding children into living their best lives through adulthood when we're not going to be there to help them, or we'll always be there to help them navigate these decisions, but when they become adults, they'll have to make these decisions on their own. So how do we give them the best tools to manage their emotions, to communicate effectively, and to create their own boundaries within the world? The next
Yeah.
thing is, oh yeah, I forgot to mention. So I did put that little line in my bio about the fashion. I do have an indigenous fashion line coming out based on some traditional stories. I think I find fashion quite uninspired. I don't know. Like all my clothes feel uninspired. So I wanted
Hmm.
to come out with a clothing line. I just bought a serger sewing machine that's like it's clothing with a purpose. Like it tells a story. Back 100 years ago, you had an article of clothing and it lasted you as long as it could. It'd get threadbare, you'd patch it. But a lot of it had purpose and meaning, especially if we look at different indigenous cultures, like the weavings told a story. And I'm coming out with a clothing line that tells a story. It's not fast fashion. I will tell you that. It's going to be slow, purpose-driven fashion. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know what the price will be, but I will be creating a fashion line of
Wow,
intentional clothing.
that is so cool. Like I said before, you're amazing, superwoman. I don't know how you do all this. I'm really like when you say clothing, feeling uninspired by clothing, I feel like that too. And I'm always wishing for like clothing that combines kind of something artistic with the clothing itself, the functional side of clothing. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna be really excited to look at what you come up with. Actually just started following you on Instagram because I think you already have an account there, and that is a good transition to, as we finish up, tell people how they can find you. So you have a website, you are on social media. If they'd like to connect with you, maybe even tap you for some of the training, consulting, coaching, and all the amazing things you do, how can they find you?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. www.eaglewomansource.com is where you can find like everything that I do. The clothing line is actually at Snaggablewear, and it's a play on words because if you're indigenous, you'll know what snaggable means. It's not PC for the, no, just kidding.
Okay.
It's not for the faint of heart. That just means it's kind of like snaggable. Like, uh, you can Google it. Um,
Okay, we'll Google
and
it.
then I'm trying to think of the snaggable wear on Instagram, Eagle Woman Source, and
Hmm.
LinkedIn, Stephanie Cote. And then I will hopefully be coming out. I just have to grab the handles, but I think Soaring Parenting is going to be my handle on Instagram. It doesn't exist yet. So at Soaring Parenting, where I'll be giving tips and tricks on parenting. I just see like even in my everyday run-ins, like stories that I could tell of people's how they've navigated parenting and how they could have made different decisions if they were given different tools. Not that I have all the answers, but there's several, you know, several paths to get to a destination. Stephanie at eaglewomansource.com. You can always email me.
Hmm. And Eagle Woman is of what significance to you and your
So
identity?
Eagle Woman or Migazi Ikwe is as the spirits know me. So I've went through my naming ceremony and my name is Eagle Woman.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Wow, I have learned so much from you, and I hope that our audience has too. Thank you so much for doing this with the Our Jahaan podcast. And for everybody, I'm going to try to share as much of this without losing any of it through editing. So we may have different versions running around because there's just so much content that is really knowledge, some myths that perhaps need to be busted, some information that we're not even aware of. And I think that we can really learn again. I truly believe deeply from each other. And I'm excited for you too, for all the things that you have planned for 2026, the things that you've been doing so far, Stephanie. And, I know that we're going to be engaging more through the Jahan Institute as well. So thank you to everybody who's been listening and watching. And we are going to wrap up for the day, wishing you guys a great start to the new year. And thanks, Stephanie.
Chimigwech. Many thanks.
Take care.
Thank you.